Yesterday we started to look at how to represent integers, and I just want to remind you of how we could do that. And in doing so, we could represent integers in a couple ways. One way would be to represent integers using red and yellow counters. I said red counters could represent negatives and yellows could represent positives. So when you see a red on the screen, it will represent a negative integer. When you see a yellow on the screen, it will represent a positive. So if I had 3 red counters on the screen, that would be 3 negatives. That's -3. If I had 7 yellows on the screen, that would be 7 positives, +7. And we're going to determine the overall value or net worth of the integers that are on the screen. So let me just kind of walk you through what we did yesterday. Again, the diagrams that I gave you yesterday showed a couple ways to represent the number -3, which is an integer. And here's one way with just 3 negatives, easy enough. And another way would be using more negatives and throwing in some positives as well. And the reason that this would work for -3 is because we have that zero principle. And if you remember the zero principle, it says that if you have 2 opposite integers, their net worth is always 0. So some opposite integers, +1 and -1, +2 and -2. Basically, we're looking for zero pairs. A zero pair will look like this. There's a zero pair. There's also another zero pair sitting right beside it. It's a zero pair because they are opposite integers. We have a positive and a negative. Same thing here, +1, -1. The net worth or net value of opposite integers is always 0. So when we go to count up the overall value of a set, we got to go, okay, we got 0 pairs. 0 pairs have no value, so I'm not going to count them. So I'm not going to count that one, nor will I count the one beside it. Nor will I count that one. Well, how many are left? Well, we have 1, 2, 3 negatives left. That's -3. That's why that is -3. And I asked you to then model for me -3 in some other ways. So let me go ahead and try to do that. So here's another way to represent -3. I'm going to do this time I'm going to do squares instead of circles. Not a big deal. It's not all that hard. Let's go ahead and do, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll do 4 negatives. So I'll color those in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, shape does not matter, color doesn't matter. And we will do 1 positive. So I got my 1 positive, shade that in. There we go. This still represents -3 because if we take a look, we've got a 0 pair. That 0 pair would be right there. I've got a -1 and a +1. They form a 0 pair. Their net worth is 0. So when it comes to counting the whole thing, I don't count them. And I'm left with 1, 2, 3 negatives. So that is also -3. And then I asked you yesterday to go ahead and start to identify some of these. And one of the things I asked you to do was to identify the groups here. This group has 3 negatives and 1 positive. We have a 0 pair on that. This group has 2 negatives and 3 positives. I see 2 separate 0 pairs there. And on this next group, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positives and 3 negatives. I notice there are 3 0 pairs there. The values of these would be -2, +1, and +2. And the reason I can say that is because if we look at 0 pairs, there's one of them. Cross it out because they don't count. That one's worth -2. We got some 0 pairs here. There's one. There's one. I'm going to cross out my number here, but we'll be able to see it anyway in terms of its value. We're left with one positive. Oh, that's a positive 1. Got some 0 pairs here as well. There's one. There's one. There's one. They don't count toward the value because their net worth is 0. So there we go. Positive 2. And that's all we're doing when it comes to identifying values. Now, what I'm asking you to do is to represent integers. Yesterday, you saw that we had an example, 3 negatives, 2 positives. We looked at it and went, hey, there's some 0 pairs there. Here's one, and here's one. Do their values count toward the overall thing? No, because 0 pairs have 0 value. Their net worth is 0. So I'm left with 1 negative. Oh, hey, that's negative 1. That would be negative 1. And I'm asking you to identify those 0 or those values of those sets, find the value, and then represent it some other way with another model. So if you remember from yesterday in your groups, one person modeled and one person drew, and we're going to go ahead and do that again today. So one person will model, one person will draw. So to draw negative 1 or to model negative 1, we could go ahead and say, I'm going to use, how about, this time I'll use squares again. To do negative 1, I'm going to do, how about 2 negatives and 1 positive. I'll color those in so we can see them a little more clearly. There's my positive, and there's one of my negatives. There's my other negative. As I look at that model absolutely represents the value negative 1 because I've got a 0 pair. Value-wise, it has none because 0 pairs always have a net worth of 0. So really, the value of that entire set is negative 1. There we go. It's the value of that set, negative 1. And that's what I'm talking about in modeling it a different way. Do not make the same model that I have on the screen already. So if you made a model with 3 negatives and 2 positives, okay, that works for negative 1, but it's also the model I already have. I want you to make a different model. So one person will make the model, the other person will then draw that model, and you can use squares that are shaded. If you so desire, you can do circles or whatever you want. I'd say squares would probably be the best if you're doing cubes, but just a thought. And you will then go through and do that. So you're going to go ahead and be given each of these sets. You need to determine the value, make a model that would be that same value that is not the exact same as what I have on the screen, and then the person who did not make the model will draw. And you will turn in your papers to the substitute, and they will then collect them at the end of the class period. This will be a grade seeing if you can represent integers. If you have any questions, please let the sub know. They can get a hold of me, and we will try to answer them as best as possible. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we will see you later.